There's a new list of appointments.
Oh, really?
I'm about to send it to you.
On the list of businesses. Oh, wow.
It's a laundry list, right?
Yeah.
Did you share with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I sent it in our group chat.
Oh, wow.
I didn't get it.
It's in the group chat, Robina. In hours, in hours.
Fab. No, there, Fab.
Yes.
No, there. Oh, okay.
Oh. Well, hello. I see who's watching. Glende. Hi.
Hi, Lindy.
Lenny.
And there's Paulina. Hey. Thank you. Thank you very much. See Finette. Jim Stubblefield.
Hi, Vanette. And who else? Paulina.
Yeah.
Hi, Paulina.
Paulina.
Hi, Bennett.
Oh, wow.
Oh, we shouldn't have any internet problems, right?
Not today.
Not today, baby. Not today. Woo-hoo.
Oh, and my darling family, I just saw her log on. Family.
I can't tell you. Hey, Kumba. Oh, is that our counselor on?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
The counselor just logged on.
Yeah. Oh, I think today is going to be a
Hi, Kumba.
I think today is going to be a very fun day because we'll be talking about something that I'm just very excited about. It's kind of sad, but I'm very excited about, the Liberianization policy. So we do have a special guest who agreed to come on at the last minute. He is the former chairman of the National Investment Commission, and right now he's back with his own firm, which is Devon Corporation, Mr. Natty B. Davis. He will be joining us later on to talk about the Liberianization policy, which is in general the Investment Act. So, but before we even get started, so last week we were on Jolly Jolly because we were celebrating our sister girlfriend. Yeah, you can't just say that a girlfriend or sister. She's a sister girlfriend, Miss Robina.
She's like, yeah, that's me. That's me.
Robina Lewis. Robina celebrated her 50th birthday last week. And let me tell you, yeah, I don't know why Charlene didn't wear her undershirt. But
well, I didn't know there was a uniform today. There should have been some type of.
I know she didn't tell us.
Yeah.
Look at yeah. So, but yes, I
Oh, it looks
decided to
fabulous on
wear.
you.
Yes. Happy birthday, Robina.
Thank you, darlings. It was
Happy
so good
birthday,
having you
Tina.
all
But I think
here.
Salamartu didn't have clothes to wear today. That was.
Oh, look at my towel.
The laundry broke.
Easy,
Oh
guys.
my goodness, the laundry. But the question, I got a question for you.
Robina, are you sure she is disrespecting you?
Do you all still feel tired?
Yes.
Not me.
She drink coconut water.
It's regular
Yeah,
water.
no, honestly, I don't know. I think with this age, even though we all look very fabulous and people don't really think we're that age, but the body, body don't lie. So I mean, I've been so exhausted, to tell you the truth. I was telling you that I've been having a lot of headaches, but I think it's because I just needed to rest.
You're exhausted.
And it was so funny. Yesterday, I literally rested my body, and I rested. I didn't have to worry about the electricity going.
But that's where you were.
You understand? I mean, I literally, I didn't have to worry about electricity going off. And I just stayed home and I rested. Yeah. So I hope everything is okay. I'm still feeling a little tired, but nevertheless, it was great to see you. It was great to spend your birthday with you. I love you. It was great.
50th birthday.
50th birthday.
I know.
Actually nice, like the three of us.
Yes.
In the same place.
I know it can never. That has not happened. And I mean, I think you all, and I think everybody who came out. But I was exhausted, yes, but it was for a good cause. It was we're fortunate to have had that time together. You met people who were dearest to my heart, from the get-go. So I'm honored, and I look forward to spending your 50th with you too, whenever that is.
That's gonna be a long time,
girl.
Don't worry about
it. Very long time.
It's going to come. It's going to come. But it was
I want to be here for it though.
Yes, I pray I will make But it was an honor. I mean, we didn't want to sleep, or we didn't want to stop. We just kept going, and I think because we kept going, we're paying for it now. But it was for It
was worth it. It was worth it.
It was worth it. Thank you so much
this week to continue to rest. Because the electricity is on.
Yeah, you gotta worry about it.
So yeah, and I got to meet Glendy. I've communicated with Glendy online. Glendy and I are actually family. So so it was really nice to finally get to meet her. And the first thing I did when I met her was take a photo and send it to my aunt. And it's just like, oh my God, I met her. Because my aunt was the one who told me. She's like, oh, you need to connect with her. So I got to meet her. I got to meet Kumba.
I know, right? Yeah. Right,
Marcia.
Don't forget Marcia.
Oh yeah, no.
She will put you on the platform.
Girl.
Queen.
What? So yeah, and also your cousin Michael Patmore. So it was really nice, and
Caroline.
I have to give it up to your husband Solomon. He was extremely hospitable. And your kids.
He's a carrier.
Yeah, and but tell you the sound. What picture now? What's that?
I downloaded pictures today, so I'll put them out.
Yeah, but no, it was really nice to spend time.
And Caroline, yes. Still going. She's still going as we speak right now. She's still in her groove.
Caroline beat my time. I can't make it. I thought I could make it. But
and she brings the stuff.
I will say, Robina, every time I turn a certain age, I always say I want to celebrate for that number of days.
No, I can't do 50 days.
No, you can't do 50, man. You will do it.
Where?
Even if it have to be just a sit down with your glass and drink and relax, you will do 50. So from today, we'll start day 50 from your actual birthday, which was on Monday. Okay, so 50 days. Yeah, no, you celebrate, man. What? You made 50. My daughter, the first thing my daughter said to me, she was like, she's what? I'm like, yeah, she's like, she doesn't look it. And you know, I had to throw myself in there too. I'm like, well,
Right.
45.
I look 45.
Well, but anyway, it was great seeing you. I'm looking at the comment. Israel is on.
Oh, you know, I 50 to mine. Israel, are you here? Or are you there?
Israel there. I
He's here.
see Sebastian is on. Sebastian said,
Sebastian said I should pay attention in class.
he's back. Yeah.
We got today.
Well, today, Israel said we all. Yeah.
Oh, man. Really? You think so?
But aging gracefully.
I know.
Aging gracefully.
We enjoyed it.
So,
we enjoyed it.
No sweat. The 50 is the new 30s.
Yeah, we carrying it too.
Like that, right?
We doubling it. Yeah. It used to say to be the new 40s, and I'd be going to 30s.
Yeah, Diana.
We'll just sleep for 2 weeks.
Oh, so ladies, now while we were living it up in Minnesota this past weekend, there was a lot of things happening on the ground. Well, not a lot of things. It was just like key stories that just seemed to have taken over the entire week, or the entire 2 weeks, I should say. So one of the things that happened, and it actually happened about a week ago, was the certification of Lofa, the senator-elect for Lofa, who was previously the Department of Defense Minister. Minister of Defense. Lord, I'm really in America. I said.
He would have said Secretary of Defense.
You hear me saying Department of Defense? Yeah, but Mr. Bronny Samukai, who I was chatting with Charlene earlier. I was like, I really don't know what the issue is at this point, because I know he paid something, but then he was told to pay something, and then he would get certified, and then he did pay something, and then it was like no, but I think Charlene probably know more. Because right now I think like most of us are just we're just confused.
Yeah, from what I understand, obviously we know the back end story where the minister at the time, Minister Samukai at the time, was given an authorization to disperse some funds or use some money from the AFL pension fund to dispatch soldiers to the peacekeeping mission in Mali. And so that happened, and then the former president, when the new government took over, the former president told the new government, okay, I gave the minister at the time, the authorization to disperse these funds, and that is what he did. So the new government now says, okay, we acknowledge it. So this is government of Liberia's debt. So the acknowledgement of the debt, and then also saying that the government is responsible for that debt. So fast forward, then there's talks about the former minister wanting to run for senator. So at that point, that is when the prosecution started to come about. So he was prosecuted, him along with his deputy and then the comptroller. They were all found guilty, and then found guilty in the amount of like $1.1 million, which had to be restituted by the three of them. Of course, the former minister who ran for senator won. Now they're currently saying that he cannot take his seat unless he pays this money. So what was it, like 330 something thousand? Salamartu?
Yeah, 300, about 330 or 380 something thousand.
Yeah, it was something less than 400,000 that each person has to pay. So the senator-elect has now paid half of that money, and then they're now saying that is it NEC or the Supreme Court that's saying that in order for him to be certificated, he must pay his disability. So I don't know why they're using the terminology disability in regards to money, but he must pay this disability in order for him to be certificated. So that's where it is right now.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a little over 383,000 USD that he was told to pay, and he paid 50% of that. And of course, he himself is asking the Supreme Court to actually clarify what they mean by disability.
Disability, right.
Yeah. So as of now, he's still not certificated. Yeah, but we'll continue to follow this story because it's just interesting to see, you know. Now, with that said, I've got Claudia is not on today. Unfortunately, she will not be joining us today. I'm waiting for some of the smart comments. She's not able to join us today. That all, okay? She have something else that came up, and she's just not able to join us today, so she'll be on tomorrow. So that said, yeah, with the running now, the other news that was big in the headline before we let our guests on, the other news that was kind of big was the U.S. ambassador press conference that he did on Thursday. I think it was the 26th of August. He did on Thursday, and it was generally to update the public about the status of the Liberia Electricity Corporation, my best friends, LEC. And, you know, as I listened to him, I was just like, this was something that I honestly had hoped that our government would have taken the bull and by the horn and has spoken about within the past year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, to explain to the public the importance of what's happening at LEC. Why is it that, you know, there's a holdup on the distribution? Why is it that why is the electricity so expensive? And the importance of power theft. But not just power theft, the importance of not paying your bill, because it's not just the general public who are stealing current. That's just not what the entire issue is. The other issue is that there's a lot of customers who are not paying their bills, including many, many, many government agencies. And I know, you know, previously they had talked about theft being, they needed to create some law that will specifically target power theft. And my question has always been, but wait a minute, yeah, when you see something, do there have to be a specific law for that? Yeah, if you steal something, you put the person in jail, you know, while you work on the specifics of power theft. But nevertheless, you know, he spoke about, the ambassador spoke about that, the fact that the government needs to prosecute people to show that, you know, they're serious about it. But what really caught my attention was the cost of electricity in Liberia as compared to, of course, the US, but just here within the region. And we're paying triple times what most of the other countries are paying, and we're getting less reliable electricity. And I am a witness to less reliable. Yeah, I am a witness to less reliable. Liberia pays 49 cents per kilowatt an hour. The US is actually 13 cents. In Ghana is 6 cents.
Wow.
In Guinea is 10 cents. And in Cote d'Ivoire, it's 12 cents. Liberia is paying 49 cents.
49
cents. Yeah. And I know that
49 or 43.
49 cents, ma. I know it was higher than that before, and then it went down.
You're going to ask small.
Yeah. But you see, now people can say, when we start celebrating, people can say, "Where are you celebrating for that? I want a celebration." So maybe it was 50-something cents. It went down to 49 cents. Be happy.
They put that every year.
And you know, people know me for the, you know, complaining about LEC, or complaining publicly about LEC, and the fact that electricity is not stable. But what they don't know is that I don't only come on Facebook and write my stuff. I actually write the company. I usually write the people a letter, just, you know, expressing what's happening. You can't be sitting in your house, you pay prepaid electricity, prepaid. Okay, I'm not stealing electricity. I prepay. You prepay. You get electricity. Half of the time, the current is so low you cannot turn your AC on. And if anybody is familiar with Liberia, they know that Liberia can be hot. You know, we're in a very tropical climate. It's hot, especially during the dry season. So, and some of us are not young. So the electricity sitting down, yeah, no, we're not that young. Yeah. You sit down and literally you have the AC on, you have the fan on. You literally have to turn the AC off, maybe turn some large appliances off. The fan, you will notice how the power is coming in if you just listen to the fan. It comes on low, it comes on high.
High low. Oh yes, mom.
Sandy is telling me I'm so on Liberia. Yes, girl, I believe in electricity. Someone actually told me that they said, you know what? It looked like you grew up with electricity. I'm like, yes, I did. I love electricity. Electricity to me is one of those fundamental rights. I think it's a right for every citizen to have access to reliable and it's a right. It's a human right.
We shouldn't be begging for it.
It's 2021.
Yes, and we begging
We're not
for
living in the 1800s. Yeah, this is all right. So, but before I even go on, y'all want to say something? Because I get very, very hot with LEC.
You said it all. It's the same thing. At least you're right. I know you got letter. You just customize it for every time something happens, and you go ahead and you speak. But is it, and then the sad part is that we think, we become complacent and we just keep it moving. We pay for a few for our generators and we keep it running, and the sad fact is that nobody's doing anything. And I think because we have dealt with nobody doing anything for such a long time, it's just the norm. Get over it. Yeah.
But what caught my attention when the ambassador was speaking was how much has been spent or how much has been given to Liberia in the last 10 years. And we still have not been able to correct our electricity problem. So that's what, really sparked the interest for me. What was it, like $1.6 billion?
Yeah.
And we're not talking millions, we're talking billions. That's a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just like, what are we doing? And like Salamartu said, it's a necessity. Everybody should be able to sleep under light. Like, it shouldn't be a privilege. It's a necessity. Everybody should have that right to have light. A child should get up every morning and have light in their house. Or if they need to study in the night, they don't have to take a flashlight or go sit underneath somebody else's fence in order for them to get light. And for that amount of money to have been spent in the country, I mean, come on, we should be light years ahead of where we are.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. Tangi is asking, is it LD?
Yeah,
no, it's USD. 49 cents, American cents.
Not ready.
Yeah, 49 cents.
Yeah, what you say?
And I don't write LEC. I write them so much that I went to the event and they wanted to introduce me. The guy said, I'm not going to call your name. He just said, I want you to meet the woman that can write the letter to us. And the man, Salamartu, yes, I write. Because I don't feel like I need to just be on Facebook complaining all the time. I write them, and I haven't written them in a long time, though. I think I need to send another.
You tire. When you
send another letter.
No, you don't. You don't. The people got all the letters that you have.
No. We need to write. Yeah, and Prince said, I'm seeing some improvement in the distribution of electricity. I am seeing some improvement in some areas, I should say. Nevertheless, I think that there's more that can be done. Generator, I don't like generator. I've heard too many bad stories before I even came to Liberia. So I have this fear of generator. Tangi said I'm gonna send the president a copy. I would not bother the man with that kind of letter. That's not the kind of letter I would send to him. But and of course, you might. The other option, of course, is solar panels. So those are our options right now. We either pay the 49 cents and pray for reliable electricity and continue to complain. Hopefully somebody will hear our cries, or we use solar, or we go to the generator, and the generator is extremely expensive. One generator are not technically designed to be electricity to
Yeah,
yeah.
to run all day.
It's sort of like a backup plan.
Yeah, all
But
night.
ladies, this isn't about alternative. It's about actually having electricity being provided by the government of Liberia.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even here in America, people buy generators for when there's a storm.
Hurricane.
That shouldn't be your source of your primary source of electricity. It should be, you know, something that you use every once a year, if that. But the conversation should really be about, you know, getting
the pollution. They don't even think about the
government of
pollution. The
Liberia.
pollution right there. The pollution is horrible. I mean, we there breathing those things in and thinking it's very normal for us to be walking around with clogged up lungs.
But so next week we're going to have Mr. Moni Captain join us to speak more about the LEC situation in Liberia. He's been it's been public, right? He's been
Yes,
it's public. That he's the new chair of LEC.
Yeah,
but I don't think he's been confirmed, but he's been appointed. So next week, Sunday, it should be a really good conversation to hear from him. He's always, you know, every time you talk to him, you honestly learn something new about what's happening, what is policy-wise or the technical staff. So yeah, that's next week. Now, speaking of appointments, I know Charlene just shared with us that there were some appointments made by the president recently. I think today, right? It came out today.
Yeah, it just came out maybe a half hour ago.
Yeah, and it's
okay. Were you?
I'm looking at the list, and it seemed as if most of the appointments, it's under the internal affairs.
Yeah, it's in the counties.
So the counties, like superintendents, district commissioners, those sort of things. So townships, so local governments mainly. And do you recognize any major agencies on here?
I don't recognize any major agencies. There's a couple of assistant minister positions, appointments that were made at the Ministry of Information, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Labor, and then of course, like you said, a bunch of Ministry of Internal Affairs appointments.
Okay, well, congratulations to the appointees. Now, trying to read some of the comments on here. Yeah.
I actually just read Tangi's comment about her moving her business to Ghana because of electricity.
Yeah, see,
we're going to continue to lose good businesses, and I mean, you know, just development in the country because we lack the bare necessities.
Yeah,
bare.
And that was one of the conversations that I did have with LEC. I'm like, it seems as if you guys are not even trying. You're not thinking about the small businesses, the smaller businesses in Liberia. You know, the larger businesses, they are catching hell, we know, but they at least have some kind of funding to purchase larger generator, what have you. But you're talking about a lot of these small businesses that we have a lot of entertainment centers. We have small manufacturers, people who are really trying to skill up that industry. And unfortunately, you know, nobody is thinking about them. That was one of the reasons why I really wanted us to talk about the Liberianization policy. So we're going to
jump into that.
Yeah, and I'm going to admit Mr. Davis.
But before you bring Mr. Davis on, can you tell us? Oh, he's already coming on.
Explain to us what the anyway.
Okay.
Oh, he's clicking. No picture. He's muted.
Okay, so hi,
Mr.
Davis.
Hi, Mr. Davis.
Hello.
You're muted. Oh, there he is.
No, I tried to get on. No, I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
I'm
There you
not
are.
muted again,
You're on.
am I?
You're on and you're on live.
There you go.
Hi.
Yeah, I was trying to get, I was trying to get on my computer, but apparently the code wasn't there. There's a freeze.
Oh,
Staticky.
yeah, you're staticking.
Sorry.
You
Is
want
it,
to?
is it a little better now?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll try with that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, thank you so much for joining us, and everybody who's watching. Mr. Natty Davis took the time, even though it was last minute, to come on tonight. He is the former chairman of the National Investment Commission under the previous administration, but now he is the managing director, right, senior partner with Devon Corporation. So thank you again for taking the time to talk to us. I think if anybody should know about this investment act, it will be you. So people have thrown the word around a lot, Liberianization. And what I've come to realize that I don't think a lot of people understand what the Liberianization policy is. So can you please tell us just a little bit about the Liberianization policy or the investment goal?
Well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me, as you said, under last minute of time circumstances, but I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to have an opportunity to share some of my thoughts. In reference to a quote unquote Liberianization policy, I think again, it has to also be treated within a context of a broader policy in terms of creating economic growth, economic strategy. How do you begin to get your economy going after conflict and all of that? So a lot of that was vested in the different processes that were undertaken. Once was the development of the revision to the Investment Act, which took place in 2010. And then the small, medium, and enterprise policy and strategy, which came into being in 2011. But when one speaks about Liberianization policy in a country, in anyone's country, you shouldn't have a policy that's actually looking to get you across. It should be the other people complaining that they're not a part of the national pie, not the Liberians complaining that they're not a part of the national pie. But again, when you go back historically, you would see and understand why. But more broadly, I would say just was to improve and level the playing field for Liberians to also be able to actively participate in the economy. And then on the basis of that, what were some of the factors that brought about the need for a situation like this? But basically, it's just to begin to equal the effort of Liberianization is to equally level the playing field. So all players that are trying to gain some levels of measures in the private sector are able to do so in a competitive and an effective way.
Okay, so I think Romina wanted to ask a question about the Liberianization policy. Now, just a very brief history about this. This was an act that was when they amended the General Business Law in 1975, the government decided to add the Liberianization policy, which set aside certain business activity that would be exclusively for Liberians. So they started off with about 12 businesses in like 1975, 1976. And then in 1998, it increased to about 26. And I think if I'm not mistaken, when I don't know when it actually split up, because the way the act is set up now, you have about 27 businesses, but they're that are exclusively for, you have 15 that are exclusively for Liberians, and then you have 12 that foreigners can participate in with a certain amount of investment. I think it's about 300,000 investment if they put in, or if they have a business, a Liberian partnership in it. So I wanted to just kind of slowly read the different businesses, and then I would pin it. So the businesses that exclusively, that only Liberian, you have to be a Liberian national to participate in, is supplying of sand, block making, peddling, travel agencies, retail sales of rice and cement, ice making and the sale of ice, tire repair shops, auto repair shops with investment of less than US $50, shoe repair shops, retail sales of timber and planks, operation of gas station, video clubs, operation of taxi cabs, importation or sale of secondhand or used clothing, distribution in Liberia of locally manufactured products, importation and sales of used cars, except authorized dealership, which may deal in certified used vehicles of their make. So those are the businesses only Liberians can participate in. Now, if the foreign investor wants to invest in certain businesses in Liberia, they have to put in about no less than 300,000, or they have to have a Liberian that is 25% a shareholder. Now, these businesses are the production and supply of stone and granite, ice cream manufacturing, commercial printing, advertising agencies, graphics and commercial artists, cinemas, production of poultry and poultry products, operation of water purification or bottling plants, exclusively the production and sales of water in sachets. Entertainment centers not connected with a hotel establishment, the sale of animal or poultry feed, operation of heavy duty trucks, bakeries, and sales of pharmaceuticals. Now, as I read the different lists from 1975 and 1976 to quite recently, this list, I noticed that there were some businesses that before it was exclusively for bakeries. There were some businesses that was exclusively for Liberian owned only, no foreigner, regardless of investment. And that was bakeries, that was the pharmaceuticals. And I think petroleum was recently added, if I'm not mistaken. And I think I wanted to ask, what exactly drove the government to decide that, Liberians, we should open up certain businesses to foreigners as compared to the other businesses? I guess is my question.
Okay, if I can respond to that quickly, the review of beginning to address the investment incentive code commenced somewhere in 2008, to the best of my knowledge, and this was on the back of the poverty reduction strategy. And the poverty reduction strategies laid out certain major milestones and goals that the government of Liberia wanted to accomplish and achieve. And then within that, now, how do you begin to get the private sector going, particularly driving the space for Liberian businesses, which are largely, unfortunately, in the Liberian context, are in the SME sectors. They're not really in the larger business sector. You see a few, but they're not in multitude. That review process then looked at what was the actual results of the 27 or 30 something businesses that were set aside, and really how then did that then effectively manifest into actually seeing those kinds of businesses operating by Liberians. And looking at some of that, like I said, this process started from like 2008 before you got then to the legislation of 2010. There hadn't been a significant amount of number of businesses that actually functioned. When you're setting in place, set aside, there are two goals that you want to accomplish. You want to create space for a group of business or business person, but you also want to continue to ensure that there is competitiveness, that is value for money, and that there is price competitiveness to the consumer. So on the basis of that, and in reviewing that, the conclusions were that all of those set asides had not achieved the intended goals and objectives. And a decision was made through a number of consultations with a number of different stakeholders to reduce that number and then create a space where you would also have not only where Liberians, you had a threshold. At this threshold, it would be set aside for Liberians, but then beyond that threshold, if you're expanding, if you're looking then to expand, not just doing business in Liberia, but perhaps doing business out of Liberia, but as Liberia as a base, it wouldn't limit the kinds of investments that could find their way into those different sectors. And as a result of that, the numbers were reduced. And then certain areas, rather than just being exclusively for Liberians, were developed in a way where you would have, yes, at a threshold, it would be for Liberians if Liberians were operating in that SME sector. But if Liberians also had partnerships that scaled that, or there were others that had investments that scaled larger than those numbers, well, then make sure that those opportunities existed as well, because ultimately you want the consumer to be able to have access to choice and access to quality and at the same time competitive prices.
Okay, now I will play the devil's advocate, because I think there's a lot of Liberians who one would say, this hasn't worked for us at all.
I agree. I agree 100%. And that's why you had then in 2011, you had the SME strategy. It's not just a question of coming in and changing an act and changing a policy. You have to then put in those different intervening measures in place that tends to then bring that result, bring the anticipated result or impact to fruition. The SME strategy, if you look at the SME strategy, has four broad goals. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Sorry. I made sure. Okay. They have four broad interventions. If you look at the SME strategy, the SME, first of all, was the legal and regulatory environment. So government works as a whole of government. Government unfortunately, it doesn't work in silos. So you have to make government work in an effective way where you have different agencies of government trying to achieve certain goals and objectives. It's just not a question of passing a law or coming up with a policy and then automatically you see it. When you say promoting in an area for Liberian business development and for Liberians to operate in these sectors, you also have to create the space for access to finance. You also have to recognize that there's a strong need for support and technical assistance into some of these businesses, because some of these businesses, when I started off my career in small enterprise development, it was an appreciation that a lot of businesses didn't really are a fundamental part of being successful in business. Okay, but how you're beginning to get businesses to understand how to manage records, and then how to be able to read what the records are indicating to you, and then how do you utilize those records for planning and implementation. Those were some of my earlier experiences. But going back now to the SME strategy. So the SME strategy recognized that you had to, first of all, look at interventions associated with a legal and regulatory framework. So there were elements in the reform that had to then be implemented by other agencies. The other one was access to markets, okay? Within those four pillars. The third one was access to finance, and the fourth one was building skills and knowledge. So when a government or a country put in place a policy, there are different interventions that also must be undertaken to be able then to make that policy or those policy objectives and goals successful. If you then look at some of the different interventions that came about after the 2011 framework. We're trying to you have building markets. Building markets was so to say executed and implemented in partnership with the government to try then to improve that access to markets and also improve building capacity. Okay, you had a number of programs that were also implemented, providing, excuse me, again, it's been some time, but providing finance guarantees. Particularly, I recall a program that was supported by the U.S. government that worked with a number of banks that provided credit guarantee program, again, to local businesses to be able to provide the opportunities of access to finance. Yeah. Then, of course, the regulatory environment. I don't think there was some progress made on that, but I think there were some challenges that exist. But you remember now, growing out of the 2011 SME strategy and so forth, then you had the commercial courts established. The whole idea is to begin to fast track issues of dispute, of conflict, and all of that. Within doing so, you have the Liberian, you want to call it Liberianization strategy, the policy. I call it more so the investment, the revisions, the Investment Incentive Act of 2010, and that then laid out then certain areas, certain businesses that were then focusing on set aside, and those businesses then that could be done in together with Liberians and a threshold. But then after that, then you then had to put in the different intervening processes that will support that and underpin that. And there are a number of different things that came about as a result of these four pillar components, but some were successful and some were not as successful. But I think if you look at overall, you would find that there were a number of successes that came as a result of the revisions that you may find in the businesses that came following the 2010 Investment Act.
And you mentioned there was a couple of things. I will go through some of the questions in a minute. You did mention some of, under those four pillars, some of the activities that were happening. I know, building markets address the access to market, and it did address the building capacity. And of course, when they left, it left a gap in there. I mean, it left a huge gap because this was an organization that actually provided a space for smaller businesses to do business with larger businesses as well. And the regulatory environment, that was when the Liberia Better Business Forum was established, right? To sort of bring the public and the private sector together to address some of the regulatory issues, even just looking at the IFC World Bank Ease of Doing Business report. So I do agree with you that there were, under these policies, you come up with the policies and then you put in measures to address the policies to be able to help the intended target, which in general are the SMEs. But if some of these pillars are not working, then it seems as if the policy isn't working. I think Veda asked a question. She said, well, outcome, please, what has been the result? What has been the result?
I don't. Again, considering that you're catching me, you caught me earlier today and asked me to be able to provide specific numbers.
Hey,
I think you can see some of the results. Look at the number of young people, okay, that have gone in business over the last five, I would say 5 to 8 years. Some have benefited, and I would hope that some of them would comment or watching the show would comment that they were able to benefit through the guarantee scheme or through other different programs. Even the creation of the small business unit in the Ministry of Commerce comes about as a result of then the Investment Incentive Act, the policy objectives that was in the SME goals, and then being able then to see a more dedicated policy oversight component that exists in government that is trying to coordinate and work with those different partners that may be implementing some of the different interventions. Okay, because it's referring to Veda's question. Well, what may have been some of the specific results? I think she is even one of the results of that, just in terms of moving along and beginning to see more and more of the opportunities and having more partners, Liberian partners, that she can even explore engaging with. So I can't really give specific numbers, but you do have a policy of government. From a policy of government, then you look at the different interventions. The interventions are supported from a number of different agencies, and all of that are intended to then bring about different policy goals and objectives. If you look at then the number of business registrations, you would have seen that there had been a growth in business registrations. If you just take the period from 2015, okay, year on year, you would see the number of growth in business registrations of Liberian businesses and so forth. Now, how many of them continue to still function and be successful and all of that? Yes, they do start and they do fail. But you do have to have those intervening programs that underpin that. And over the years, we've lost a number of those different intervening programs and initiatives for a number of different reasons. And you pointed out, for instance, the building market situation. It's, to me, I would have hoped that the building market situation, where it has started from the government working in partnership with a couple of their development partners to get this program going, that when it reached the point where the development partners said we don't have the resources to continue to fund this, that the government would have identified local partners to say, well, can you take this and can you be, because it has still significant value as far as continue to support and build the efforts of local entrepreneurs, particularly because the building markets program was really mostly targeted at how do you help domestic businesses become more linked to the concession sector, to particularly to the extractive sector, the mining concessions, the agriculture concessions, the timber concessions, and those kinds of places, because most of them operate like enclaves. And how do you then begin to try to respond to that? I will give you an example. One of the things that I know building markets was able to make some real accomplishments on was engaging with some of the different partners in the concession sector, particularly iron ore and oil and gas. So how do you address the point between issuing a purchase order, delivery, and payment? Because for the major players, if they give you a purchase order, as far as they're concerned, well, they go and execute. When you execute, you submit your invoice. We check that against delivery note and everything, and then we put it in the process for payment. If that process for payment is 2 months, 3 months, okay, fine. You're a business, you're able to manage that cash flow. You should then have a relationship with a bank so that if you put in and you get that purchase order, you're able to find the resources to finance that work, where you're not going back to the concessionaire asking for an advance payment, simply because that's not the way they do business. And when the Liberian businesses come and begin to require that. So building markets did a lot of work and I'm just citing that as an example. There were a number of other partners that were working in some of the other sectors. I make reference, I forget, IBEX, was it IBEX or something to that nature?
Yes.
That was also supporting, right?
Yes.
That was also on the financing side, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there was an IBEX, I believe, that was supporting on the financing side, working with a few of the banks, and then working with a number of the different sector businesses to be able to help them get to the point where they were actually able to get bank guarantees, to be able to get financing when they had won the bid for some of these projects and some of these contracts from the concessionaires. So as an example, but it is a whole of government situation. It's not a piecemeal situation, unfortunately. And so if a number of the different components don't come together effectively, then you do have limited types of performance or limited amounts of performance overall as far as the policy goals and objectives.
Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the questions. I hope that answered your question, Veda. I see that you're saying yes. Wish government had maintained building markets. The linkages were crucial for agriculture. Seems as if the Ministry of Agriculture is now beginning to follow that model, which is great. Now the other questions were the other questions was about the enforcement of the policy. Enforcement of the policy has been a major failure. Why? And I'm going to reference a case that happened maybe about 3 years ago with Nice Ice Cream and Shark Ice Cream, the ice cream industry, and it focused more so on the issue of fronting. Nice Ice Cream opened up the ice cream parlor. There was some complaint that they shouldn't have been doing that business because it was reserved for Liberian unless you had a Liberian partner or the $300,000 investment. This case actually, I know the Chamber of Commerce, when I was there, went to the Ministry of Commerce. We sat down, we talked about it. It was during the last administration. Um, in the end, there was no law against fronting. And fronting is basically, I open a company that I'm not supposed to open, and I get somebody else who legally is supposed to be in that space. I get them to pretend like they're running the company. So, and this was what Nice Ice Cream was accused of doing, I should say. But nevertheless, during that time, the Ministry of Commerce, they did an administrative regulation, which, from my understanding, administrative regulation tends to last for 1 year, right? It's just a year unless it's renewed, right, Natty?
No, no, no.
No,
Administrative regulation. I think you're thinking about an executive order.
or the
Administrative
okay.
regulation.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
administrative regulation remains in place. Yeah.
Okay, so even better. So they did an administrative regulation to address fronting while they figure out how to pass a law, I guess. And the whole idea was to say, okay, if someone goes to register a business and they register one of those restricted businesses, instead of that process going through the normal business registration, it will be flagged. It will be brought to the Ministry of Commerce. You will have the chamber, you will have LIBA, the Liberian Business Association, and you will have Commerce sit down, and they will do the investigation to ensure that that company has actually invested the amount, or the company has a Liberian who is doing the business. I say this to say, when it comes to enforcement of these policies, not one time after that policy was issued, because it was very welcoming, like, okay, now we can maybe sit to the table, we can ensure that whoever says they're running this business, they are they're on the bank records, they're actually on the legal documents. But we were never invited to one meeting. And I'm like, within the last, this thing happened, what, in 2016, 2017. From then on, nobody has registered any business under the restricted businesses. So I'm just kind of laying that out for this question about compliance. Do you think part of the issue is the fact that we are not really enforcing? Because we do believe and we do see a lot of other nationals getting involved in some of these businesses that I read off, selling ice, for instance, doing sand mining, to be specific, sand,
Mm.
ice, and I can go on and on. So, what do you think about the enforcement aspect of this? And ladies, you can
Yeah.
ask questions because I'm just here asking my questions.
Well, yeah, you're very
Oh,
knowledgeable.
because I thought it was part of the questions coming from in the chat.
Yes, yeah, it is. It
No,
is.
some is. Yeah.
Okay, so should I touch this before the other questions come?
Yes, the informal.
Yes, please.
Again, not to be repetitive, but government works as a whole of government. Policies are not policies are not enforced. Policies are actually a set of goals, objectives, and aspirations of a government. Okay.
Mhm.
And then those goals, aspirations, and are then developed into either laws that underpin it, regulations, or different procedures and processes that makes then this policy goal and aspiration attainable and achievable. And so it requires sometimes it requires a number of different agencies to work together to make some of that happen. And sometimes it also requires key driving agencies and so forth. Now, when you make reference to the Ministry of Commerce is a major implementing agency associated with that. So was the NIC, so was the central bank. Number of different, so to be able to say goals and objectives come to being. So uh, you don't enforce policy, just to provide a little bit clarity to the question that may have come from some of your viewers. You do then make sure that you put in place regulations and processes and procedures then to be able to bring about those policies, goals, and objectives. And some of that also then deals with the judiciary, which is a major component of that happening. I think that's why the effort even came up with the creation of the commercial court to try to fast track when there are complaints or when there are representations that come from different parties that suggest that certain actors are operating and contravening regulations or laws, that you're able then to bring those different actors and so forth to book. It is a challenge where you maybe put that before then the regulatory bodies, and then the regulatory bodies don't act accordingly, and then you don't see some of the results and come, and that can break things down. That's a fact.
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
a fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it just and again, I don't want to belabor this, but it is always a whole of government. It's not just a one agency makes this thing here work. There are a number of different actors that come into play within those different interventions, and that has to then be led largely at the top. When you make reference to the Better Business the improvement business something that was meant as a coordinating body, because you do have a number of different public actors that are supposed to implement different regulations, different procedures, different guidelines, okay, associated then with achieving those goals. And there was some modicum of success associated with that coordination framework, but it's something that has to continually be built upon.
Right.
And unfortunately, over the last few years, we've seen a drop on that. Some of the implementation or some of the coordination opportunities that would exist to try to bring that about possible. Recently, the government, for instance, had a substantial judicial conference, I think, where the government then tried to point out that a good bit of the problem, a good bit of the challenges, let me not say problem before I fall into conflict with any of my colleagues, but a good bit of the challenges that we are facing right now have substantial lack of real performance from the judiciary. And I haven't seen the report and the outcome of that particular thing, but it was something that I think the government has highlighted, because those are when you talk about, for instance, if I'm in a sector and I see someone who I believe is contravened, when you take in the case with the ice cream or the ice cream and sharks, then I should be able then at some point now, once I make a complaint to whatever the authority, whoever the authority exists as a result of then government structure, to be able to provide that complaint. If I'm not satisfied with that, there should be then a next level of recourse.
Exactly.
And that
Right.
level of recourse could be then going to court and
Yes.
you know, suing the establishment and even enjoining the government if that should be the case.
Right.
Okay, so those are the elements that have to come into it. It's just not a question, well, okay, this policy is out there and therefore we want to see then improvement then in the environment as a result of the existence of this policy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for touching on that, because I was wondering about the regulatory aspect of it and the judiciary. So thank you. You've actually, now I see how things work and how it has been working, and now I understand. There is this breakdown. Thank you.
And I think one of my frustration, you know, we've been talking a lot about the, you know, the government, what the government should do and what the government shouldn't do. I see a comment here about maybe perhaps that some Liberians are just complacent with what's happening. And while I do know a lot of Liberian business owners who I've seen to be very resilient, who, you know, they're out there, they're trying, they're doing their best under the circumstances. But I do have to agree that I have seen many who are very complicit. One of my first meetings when I joined the Chamber of Commerce, when I was Secretary General of the Chamber of Commerce, was the Better Business Forum at the IFC. Of course, during the last administration, the Better Business Forum was this initiative which brought together the private sector and the public sector, brought them to a table to discuss some of the issues that businesses were having. And I think most of the issues kind of focus alongside the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. So you sit to the table and you tell the public, the government, you know, what are some of the challenges you're having, and perhaps maybe even recommend what they can do. So this was a great platform for the public and the private sector to dialogue. Unfortunately, you know, what happened, what didn't happen, the LBBF, there was no activity after a while. There was no money coming in, I guess, and that program shut down. But I know that they have restarted the LBBF. But my frustration a lot of times with the business community is that, you know, when we sit at the table to discuss policies, you know, we invite people to come and, you know, tell us about the challenges that you're having, but not only tell us about the challenges that you're having, also make recommendation. Government is not business people. You're the business person. You are the expert. You're the one doing the day to day. So when you come in, you say something to business, things are not going to happen overnight. So you can't expect, you know, you come in, you say something, and tomorrow everything is okay. This is what it means by fighting for the private sector. You come in, you stay on top of it, you document it. Most people didn't want to document things. Most people will show up to 1 or 2 meetings and get very tired and say, you know what, we've been talking about this for so long, so therefore, you know, I don't want to talk about it anymore. And as you do this, this is where a lot of the 4 pillars that he's talking about, this is where institutions just say, well, you know what, the people don't need it, and start to fall apart. What would happen if the micro and small businesses are consistently pressuring government to say, you know what, we need affordable access to financing. I see a comment on here about, you know, government also maybe not paying, the government itself being a major constraint for a lot of the small businesses. When they do have contracts with some of these government agencies, it's very difficult to get your money from them. When we talk about Liberianization, it's in the general scheme of things, it's about ensuring that the Liberian businesses are not suffocating, the Liberian businesses are actually succeeding. And this is all part of the problem. But
Right.
you cannot continue to be complicit. You cannot continue to sit back and say, you know what, I've spoke out about it 2 or 3 times. Nobody's done anything. So therefore, I'm not going to attend any of these meetings. I'm not going to participate in the conversation, because policies will be made with or without you. So
Yes.
you better make sure that if you are invited to that room, that you're sitting in the room and you're participating. You're not just there to listen, but you're there to listen. You're there to express some of the challenges that you're having. And you're also there to make recommendations
Right.
to the government. So
Right.
you go on record where you're saying, hey, look, it was a group of us that said, if you did this, this will help us greatly.
Right.
So in that regards to being complicit, I think there are a lot of people who are exhausted, they're tired, and they are complicit. But if we're going to strengthen the Liberian private sector, there's no room for complacency.
Mhm.
So can I come
Do
in
you have
really
any
quick?
questions?
Yeah. So I just want to take us all the way back to when we first started the conversation. Reading through the list of businesses that are exclusively for Liberians, I'm still trying to figure out why those businesses, if this thing was when 1950, you said,
Mhm.
whenever
No, no,
the first
not
1970, in the 70s.
1970.
1973 and 1975, there were some revisions made.
Okay, so now here we are in
And then
2021
2010. And then
and then
2010.
2010. In 2010, was it revised where there were additional businesses that were included into that list? Or was it when we just had the other business people or the other nationals be able to participate in these businesses with a certain amount of investment? Is that
And actually in 2010, there was a reduction in the number, okay,
okay?
of those businesses that were set aside. And then there were then a category then that was added to that, that would then said, okay, that you would then establish some thresholds. But there was a reduction in the overall number.
Mhm.
I think, as I pointed out, there had been at least as much effort in terms of a review of the research of the initial policy goals and objectives that existed as in 1973 and 75. um, what were the business environment of the time, what was the economy of the time, and then looking then at the new situation, and then looking at going forward, what would then be certain growth sectors, what may then present certain growth opportunities. So all of those considerations went into that process. As I said, the process of actually coming up with the recommendations for the revisions to the investment incentive law in 2010 started actually in 2008. With a series of a number of different consultations. As a matter of fact, fortunately, we do hold on to some files, and so once I got the invitation from Salamartu, I went back and I checked some of our files, and I saw the different roundtable events and the minutes from those different
Mm.
roundtable events that took place with a number of different sectorial partners before. And as I said, growing out of the poverty reduction strategy, which came out in 2008, and that poverty reduction strategy, because that was the interim poverty reduction. You first had the interim poverty reduction strategy, and then you had the poverty reduction strategy, Liberia Rising. And those, some of those key elements, that's what drove then beginning then to make revisions to the act. But uh, I don't think you can really get away from the reality as far as a whole of government. Government has to work in whole. Unfortunately, you can't have one element. If you take in terms of the historical context, for someone like me who has really been in enterprise development for a large part of my professional career, and have dealt with it, not just being in business, but also finding myself both at the policy level, at the regulatory level, and at the implementation level. Um, as a large measure of the challenges then that existed there, when you talk about people stepping up to the plate, when you talk about people taking responsibility, people are prepared to challenge the establishment and be involved. Uh, historically, Liberians in the 20s, in the early 1900s, the late 1900s, sorry, in the late 1900s, coming into the early 20th century, Liberians were very much involved in business. They were involved in the enterprise of farming, the enterprise of transportation associated with that farming, the enterprise of
Yeah.
trading, and all of that. Over the years, as you begin to get growth that took place with respect to after the war, uh, 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 um, and how then the Liberian economy grew, I think it also created a pull for many Liberians then that moved away from the private sector and moved into the public sector. Now, when you look at the people who are currently in the public sector, you find very few people who have had previous private sector background. And that's it. To me, that's something that is a factor as to how then government itself responds to the private sector, because you have a majority of players who have no appreciation of the private sector. There's no empathy. There's no understanding.
Right.
And I think that is a factor. I may be wrong, and I would definitely like to receive some of the comments from your viewers and your listeners in that regard. But I have always found, even when I was in government and I expressed that, a number of our colleagues were very adversarial to the private sector. They actually saw the private sector and see the private sector in an adversarial way rather than seeing the private sector in a partnership perspective, and being prepared then to work with. I mean, it's one thing where, yes, we're crowd of boys. You're in the public sector, I'm in the private. I come to you with an idea. Rather than shoot me down, why not say, oh, if you say, well, okay, well, it can't work that way, but let's look at it this way. Let's consider this. Instead, you just shoot it down. My man, I think again, worry about it, and you just finish with it. So
Yeah.
some of that, a lot of that doesn't exist. And that's been some of my experience. A lot of that doesn't exist. And I think if we had more people who actually had some private sector experience, who were in government, or who are in government at this time, would then have a more appreciation, therefore, of those different things that are necessary to underpin driving on the domestic private sector. I agree with you also. People in businesses must recognize that there is strength in numbers. Yes, you may ask, well, why should I bother to spend my time getting involved in this initiative or getting involved in that initiative? It doesn't take so much investment from you. It doesn't take so much for you to be a part of, a member of the chamber, of the member of Liberian Business Association, of anything to that nature, to pay your dues, to make sure that you have a vehicle, okay, to target, okay, a greater expression of your voice and your views in terms of channeling that to government, because you do need that.
Right.
That is a function of the whole of government process. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm just gonna read, William here said, excellent point. Government do see the private sector as competitors versus collaborators. He did have a question about what were the criteria used to select specific business sectors for the Liberianization policy.
Um, Again, it's been a while, but to the best of my knowledge, were to look at those different areas that you really did need a substantial amount of capital to commence and get started. Okay, you're not going to come from a second country as an expatriate or something to that nature and just come and, yeah, okay. Even if you come out of the ECOWAS region, and we do, and that was you have certain gray areas there. But even if you come out of within the ECOWAS region, um, the whole goal of the movement of people is to see the continuation of transfer of skills, technology, knowledge, and so forth amongst its people. So you don't want then to see someone coming out of Cote d'Ivoire and begin to say, well, look, I'm going to start selling coals. You want to be able to encourage professionals that come out of Cote d'Ivoire that come into Liberia and say, well, okay, I'm going to do something that then adds substantially more value in terms of the investment framework and what else have you. So to the best of my knowledge, those sectors that were identified were low value investment sectors, one, not substantial amount of skills requirement as far as getting going. That would, I think, would have been one of the other considerations. The third consideration is that they could have been started primarily with you, maybe and a colleague or a family member, rather than having then to employ a substantial amount of people at initially at going. So there again, it had then a low startup investment requirement, and it provides then the basis, and it's largely around so the trading sector, which Liberia is predominantly is, and around the service sector. And again, within that service sector, where you may see a large amount of volume in terms of demand and transactional requirement. So there are a number of smaller businesses that could begin to operate in there.
Yeah, and then also looking at the government's interests for investors.
I think he's frozen.
Oh.
Looks like we lost him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, here.
Yeah, looking at the priority areas in the government where they were really trying to attract investors. So there's like agriculture, construction, the extractive industries, and of course tourism. So as you look at some of these businesses that are listed, those industries more than likely could benefit from those priority areas. So I don't know if that answered that.
Sorry.
Yeah, did you hear me?
Trying to call me that I'm on the phone.
Oh.
I think so. Please, I think I missed the last part.
No, I was saying that the government actually had prioritized certain areas for investments to attract investors. So it seems as if it sort of kind of complements the list of businesses. So like agriculture, construction, the extractive industries, and of course, tourism industry. It would seem like if Liberians got into some of these businesses, they would benefit some kind of way from targeted.
Well, you know, if you, I think, and if you come close to going to that point where I believe the policy of the government at that time was to try to begin to encourage foreign direct investment, and the government was actually seeing itself pursuing resuscitation of the I&O sector, resuscitation of the agriculture sector through a number of different concession agreements that they were negotiating, beginning to start to exploit the oil and gas sector. Those areas. So I would think that would have been some of the considerations in terms of zeroing in on some of the sectors. But like I said, the underpinning programs that would then support that and bring about those policy goals, those policy objectives. So.
Okay. There's a question here. What is the difference between the formal or informal market as it relates to the policy?
They basically, again, if you read a lot of the information and if you look at some of the data concerning with Liberia, you do have a large amount of informality. And when we call informal businesses, it's businesses that are not necessarily within the overall scope of the government. I wouldn't say government regulation, but total state capture, because total state capture in that you have them in your tax network, they have tax IDs, they have national IDs, they have all those different things that in some way or another, the government is able to measure them. The government is able, even when the government is undertaking through lists, is undertaking any survey, they are then part of a universe of data. Informality then actually are those operators that fall outside of that whole framework. They're operating, they're not registered. They generally will not have a bank account in their business, so there's no real registered business name. If they do have a bank account, the bank account is in that individual's name, not a business name, and in most cases is in a savings account and not a demand account. You know, it's those different things are some of the different characteristics that makes up
The informal.
what you call the informal. Just to say, oh, petty traders, there are businesses that are a little larger that still fall in the informal sector because they refuse to register or pay taxes or
Right.
things so that they, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So any questions? I'm looking through here. Just very educational.
According, we do have a large in Liberia, the Mono River subregion.
Say that again.
Are you speaking to me? Are you speaking
Yeah.
to a question?
No, you were saying something about the Mono River Union.
I said, particularly in the Mono River Union sub-region, you do have a lot of informal businesses. It is reasonably across the board. It is a reasonably high number of the informal businesses that operate in this space.
Okay.
But do we so we have a lot of them in Montserrat as well, right?
Oh yeah, well, you have a lot of them. You have a lot of them. Yeah, the petty traders that are more visible, you will probably find them somewhere in between formality because, you know, because of their visibility, people can come and grab their wheelbarrows and say, okay, you have to be part of this and so and so. But you still have a lot of them that are not. You still have a lot of them that are not. So, and quite frankly, the reality of growth is that would exist, and then you put in different interventions that help them find their way from one to another. I think a good story that you can also you can always take to the bank is Fumba Tuarale, who does the
tissue
I think the tissue factory and stuff. Yes. Fumba storage. Fumba started as a wheelbarrow. Yeah, Fumba started as a wheelbarrow salesman, and then grew into where he is now.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay. So yes, if
oh, we're losing.
Yeah, we're losing you. You're going in and
out. I know.
You put in place the different kinds of supportive interventions, as we said, when you look at the 4 different elements, technical assistance, access to finance, more information, access to could scale.
Yeah, look, that part of our infrastructure.
I know, right?
To help them scale further and further and higher up.
Okay, you're going in and out.
Right. And now we can't hear him. He's muted.
Oh, sorry, it dropped.
There you go, Natty.
Yeah, but yeah, so informality in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's an appreciation that you do have environments that you have higher levels of informality simply because of a number of different challenges. But when you're looking at how do you continue to grow, especially domestic enterprises, you have in place the interventions that help people in the informal sector gradually find their way in the formal sector and then be able to scale into some of your larger businesses.
So Fumba started from the wheelbarrow. Now he has that huge, it's in Painesville, where he does the tissue and then the
tissue,
the trash bin.
The last time I had a chance to visit Fumba place, not only was he doing tissues, but he was beginning to do soaps and and exploring then different kinds of and so forth. So,
Yeah.
but like, as I said, you can use that as an example from informality to formal and a substantial employer and taxpayer.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, I honestly I didn't know that story, that part of the story about him that
About him, man.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't know that either. And then we worked with him before. Remember too?
Yeah.
There you
Wow.
go.
Yeah, we worked
A
with him.
success story.
Yeah, did not know that. Wow.
Well, I like to say, Mr. Davis, you're our first male guest.
I know, he didn't really realize that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
That'd be totally
Oh my
forgot.
God.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
you
this was
are.
really, really informative.
What? He is
Well,
the
it's good to know
first.
that I continue. It's good to know that I continue to set records.
Okay.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Oh my God. But this
Wow,
was
we didn't even
this
realize.
was
Wow, that means the first one. Well,
yeah.
there you go.
Thank
This
you.
was extremely educational. I would definitely send you the link to share with your network and anybody else who might find this very helpful for them. And please, we will again invite you to come back on, but we will give you plenty notice.
No time.
Plenty notice we will give you to come back on, because you know the 4 pillars that you touch on, I know for a fact we can spend one show on each one of those pillars. Those are issues that a lot of our micro and small businesses talk about. So we would definitely invite you to come back on and give you plenty of notice. But thank you so much. I'm trying to see if we have any more questions. There was one more before we go. That would be the last question. Yeah. Why has value addition to products such as rubber and iron ore been so marginalized?
Well, I mean, those are more substantive and philosophical questions. I think um, we could have done more in terms of the value addition, especially on the side of the rubber side, as a people. And I'm not going to say, whether this government or last government, because I think successive governments have not then taking some of the measures to put in place those different again, interventions that bring about certain types of it's one thing to have an aspiration. Okay, a lot of times you hear, oh yeah, we should have this, oh yeah, but quite frankly, there has to be then interventions that have been undertaken on behalf on the part of the government, on behalf of the entrepreneurs or the people who are in business, and then maybe perhaps on behalf in addition to some of the development partners who are working with Liberia to try to achieve certain goals and objectives. If you look at what is happening, for instance, in the cocoa sector, with the kinds of efforts and interventions that's been taking place with, I think, is it the Netherlands or the Danes? I'm not too sure. But one of the Nordic countries where being a substantial buyer, a substantial user of cocoa, they've actually then are supporting programs that impact that have a positive impact in terms of the growth cycle, the quality, and all of those things of the local farmers, so that it improves the yield, it improves the actual harvest, and also improve certain stages of processing before then it's exported, and that provides a value addition. Clearly we could do a lot. There's no dispute, there's no doubt to that, but it's not going to come about just because we just say, oh, it should come about. It has to come about through interventions of the government, through continuing engagement and initiatives by many of the Liberians who are in the rubber sector, and there has been some progress that have been made in the last several years with respect to the Liberians in the rubber sector. I think there is now a rubber development fund, which is actually being supported by the different rubber producers. The Ministry of Agriculture is also now implementing a number of programs and associated with some value addition. But we are behind the curve. We you know, it's something. These are things that should have been done many years ago from successive governments. So it's not even to suggest, well, okay, the government you were in, the government I was in didn't do enough. Previous governments didn't do enough as far as making sure that the kinds of inputs and elements that should have come about to really see value addition in the iron ore sector. I think the challenges are a little bit more substantial, but I think moving forward, there are opportunities that would begin to, if you look at the coming about of the Africa Continental Free Trade Act, program, that should be creating then opportunities for the expansion of trade within African countries and among African countries. That then will require a substantial amount of infrastructure and investments in infrastructure, particularly in roads, but also in railroads, in ports, and those kinds of situations. And all of those things that require steel. If you look at from a regional consideration, Guinea within Africa are just a most substantial deposit of high-grade iron ore in the world. Liberia still has some very interesting deposits, and so does Sierra Leone, and so does Cote d'Ivoire. Okay. But within the context of the Marana River Union for iron ore, those governments would really have to come together to look at and work together then to probably possibility of a steel industry. So we're not exporting iron ore to another country that is then producing it to the steel and then selling it back to a number of different African countries that needs that steel to build their infrastructure. But it does require a substantial amount of investment. It does require some national collaboration and so forth. But I think there are opportunities that are coming about that should make that possible. But from the rubber sector, there's much more we could have done, but there's still some opportunities that are before us that I think we could take advantage of.
Okay, so William here also wrote, in regards to the question he asked, not promoted, we tried to start a condom manufacturing plant, but was not successful because Firestone refused to supply the latex. However, when you were NIC director, you tried as you signed the investment letter. So thank you. All right. So I think if there's not any more questions, we will really like, again, once again, to thank you so much, Mr. O. Natty B. Davis, for taking the time to come and educate us about the Liberianization. And I really hope people took away one, the understanding of what the policy is, not so much in terms of we like the word Liberianization, but understand that this is part of the investment. What is it? The Investment Act, right?
The Investment Act of 2010.
The Investment Act of 2010. So it's listed in there. But when we now start to talk about Liberianization, we need to think about everything else that goes into it and all of the stakeholders that plays a part in it, not just the government agency and our partners, but also the business people as well, most especially our micro and small businesses. And the reason why, when we talk about Liberian-owned businesses, we keep saying micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, is because many of the Liberian-owned businesses fall within that category. So when we say it's sort of kind of interchangeable, we're referring to Liberian-owned businesses. I posted this question on my Facebook page this week and just saying, has this really helped you as a Liberian business owner, the Liberianization policy? And someone commented, it's pretty sad that we would need affirmative action in Liberia, and even with the affirmative action, it's still not working for us, or we're still not seeing the improvement. So, you know, it was, you know, when I read the answer, I'm like, you know, I do agree, but it was just so depressing to see that you're in Liberia.
I think that's a valid observation. And to be very honest with you, it's you know, again, not to take you way back into historical context, because that is some of the reason why you do need an affirmative act. You go back and far into historical context, because as I pointed out to you, in the mid and late 19th centuries, you did have a lot of Liberians that were in business, and that were very much involved in the various trading aspects of the Liberian economy. But gradually, as the economy increased, you do have a situation where, for instance, someone who is farmer and substantial more growth and everything else, they send their children to school, and they send their children to get that education that they didn't have. Okay, and then when you have that growth that is taking place in the society, they encourage their children then to take those, to go for those positions, because those positions of jobs were available. They are encouraged because that made them proud. It made them proud to see that, to take my son, and then he doesn't have to be a farmer again. Now he can now go and now be a director in government, a director for this sector, director for this area. And you did have that really pull that took place. I recall just recently sitting with one or two of my contemporaries and some of our children, and just sharing with them, you know, they make Red Flag Day, for instance, when we talk about, or when people say 178 years or whatever the case may be, and we don't have this, I said, well, no, we have those things. There are a number of those things that really that existed way before many of us came about. But over the years, especially through conflict and everything to that nature, we destroyed much of this, and therefore a need then to have in place a something that then is to bring about leveling the playing. When we graduated from college, there were just so many jobs available. You knew you were getting a job before you, like a colleague was just saying to me, he said he did chemistry, okay, and before, I think in his junior year in college, Capine have then a visitation with all of the chemistry students, the students who were graduating from with degree in chemistry, and would then look to hire the best.
Oh, wow.
Another they said yes, it was the same thing with Dr. Nehemiah Cooper. Okay, once he found that once he got so and so and so, there was that whole recruiting thing. There career days and career rounds where a number of the different companies would come. So that took away a lot of the people then who would have continued the businesses that our grandparents were doing. And so, yes, and only because we found ourselves then more in government, and we found ourselves going that direction, is then to try to encourage people to find their way more back into the private sector. And that's why then you have then these different Liberianization policies and initiatives, just to begin to drive and create people who remained in the private sector. For instance, a number of the traders, they themselves have sent their children to school, but they have the capital. They've been able then to develop the banking relations, and all of those things that allow then their children then to better be. It's just a reality. It is just a reality as far as, you know, what it is. So what are those instruments that you can put in place to provide then leveling that playing field, so that you can find more Liberians going into a number of different sectors and opportunities in the private sector? But I agree with you overall, yes, a country should not be looking at a policy for it should be the non-Liberians that are completely that they're not opportunities for us, but you have to look at things from the historical context.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So thank you. Why we will allow you to leave, but thank you so much for joining. I know it's kind of late over there.
Yes, well, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy that I was able, and I'm happy that I was able to make a record to be the first man
Yes,
that
you
been able to speak
are.
on this show. So
And
there you go.
we
Thank you,
don't have any
Natty.
gift for you, but just our things.
You're
I
very
know we will
welcome.
have a
You're very
gift for you.
welcome.
You are the first,
The
so we'll
first,
make
yeah,
sure that
yeah.
we
We'll make
make
sure
note
we
of
always
that.
say that.
Yes.
Okay, well, and I look forward to being invited again, especially if I have enough time to better get prepared with respect to some specific numbers that might be helpful to the discussion.
He will not let go of their last minute too.
I know, right? You want to
Yeah,
rub
he
it.
will not let go of his last minute.
Rub it, Guya, Natty, be rub it.
Good night, ladies.
Good
And
night.
thank you
Good
very
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Oh, that was good.
That was
That
really
was
good.
very,
Yeah.
I mean, Salamartu, I
Wow.
know this SMME, what is it? SM or MSME?
MSME.
Yes,
SSNE.
that's your thing. And once
And that's
we
her,
start
yeah,
talking
that's her
about it,
area.
like you get so involved and get so passionate.
No,
So
I
it's
get,
like,
let me tell you
That's
something.
your passion.
Yeah, I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I like to see people succeed. I
of course.
really like to see people succeed. I also, there's something about me that I love to root for the underdog.
Yeah.
And I always feel like, our MSMEs, our Liberian-owned businesses, they are the underdogs because I've seen some things that maybe I shouldn't have seen. I know some things that maybe I shouldn't have been privileged to, but I know some things that happen in Liberia that seem to almost target Liberian-owned businesses, whether it's direct or indirect. And it's sad for me because, I look at a large business, you're doing good. It's almost like Amazon, you're doing great. Why should you worry about the man that making coconut water?
Right.
Yeah,
Companies like
in your
Amazon,
name.
they don't even worry about
Yes.
that. If anything, they will say, you know what? Why don't you come be on my platform? Because the money that you generate, it's not going to do anything for me. If anything,
Right.
it's even going to,
Yeah, it's like a drop in the bucket for them.
yeah. But I've seen how some large companies in Liberia, and foreign owned to be specific, have really kind of choked some of our smaller businesses. I've also seen how the lack of attention, maybe from government, ignoring what is directly or indirectly, like he was discussing these different pillars that we just seem to kind of drop the ball on, and
Right.
we expect the international partners to take care. You see this. I'm looking at like the Tangi. Tangi just said something simple as electricity.
Right.
Something as simple
Right.
as electricity.
Right.
Tangi is not a huge operation. We can sit down, try to figure out, the industrial park that we have in Liberia. We can sit down, try to figure out, okay, how do we ensure that we do have electricity there, we do have water there, so a lot of small businesses can operate in an environment where they will be able to survive.
Yeah.
We can sit down.
Yes.
She's one of the people that I just met last year, and she started making red oil. I invited her to one Made in Liberia fair, and to see what she's doing now is like, even if I was a part of that process for 1%, I'm like, yay, she's doing it. I even remember having a conversation with Mamu Johnson, J. Palm, and I asked him, like, what exactly can government do to maybe help you thrive? Mamu has done so well.
Yes.
Mommy asked for money.
You asked for money.
Well, he asked for, he said, you know what? We usually import a lot of our packaging because we don't really have a packaging plant in Liberia. So we have to import a lot of these things. He said, only, they need to stop giving us a hard time at the port. Yeah, they need to stop giving us a hard time. And perhaps maybe some of these small businesses, maybe target 25 and say, hey, look, for these 25 businesses within the next 5 years, we're going to ensure that you fly your stuff in duty free for your business.
Yeah.
We're going to give you tax incentive. We're going to do this. We're going to do that for the next 5 years because we want to see you grow.
Yeah.
It's not a hard thing to do. It's not anything other governments So those are some of the things that you throw out there, and it is almost like, no, we don't want to do it. If you put one sign up in front of your business, we're coming for you.
Oh yeah, then LRA and all the different.
The environment is not very friendly at all. It is not, and it's discouraging. You see, and you talked about it, how they go to the table and they sit there, and you're already stressed from that, and then you're going and sitting there like, well, nothing's going to come out of this. So they have to find a way to actually encourage these people and bring them back to the table and make things work.
Yeah. So, but with that said, I want to thank everybody for joining. I see Miss Charlene Brumskin. Hey, ladies.
Hey, Charlene.
Thanks for joining. I see Ernest. Ernest, you lost. What?
So why you spoke to him in your Liberian English?
Oh, I see I see my buddy on here.
Really disappear.
I see my buddy on here.
Yeah, Ketuma, how are you? William here. Thank you so much for the great questions. I hope you tune in next week. We scheduled to have Mr. Moni Captain, and we'll be talking about my favorite company in Liberia, LEC.
I love it, yeah.
That's gonna be a really good conversation, because every time you talk to Mr. Captain, it's always very informative.
Oh, yeah.
He is like a walking, vast knowledge. He just walks around with so much in his head.
And then sometimes he can make you feel sorry for the LEC people. He can
Right.
But you make you feel sorry for him because he's a little biased. He worked with the Millennium Challenge.
Him But when he starts talking about maybe some of the challenges that maybe the public don't know about for LEC, I can honestly start to feel sorry for LEC. I'm like, hey, yeah, okay.
He a second
until we get light, we will not have any sympathy for LEC. Sorry, cousin Moni.
Cousin Moni said, "Why you see my utu?" That way you tell me why you see my utu.
So next Sunday, it's 9:00 Liberian time. The GMT time, 9:00 Liberian time, and 5:00 East Coast.
Yeah, we had to check you that you forgot. It's okay. It's okay. And you didn't even put my time zone there. So mommy was trying to get on 5:00. I'm like, but we're done.
No, ma. Yeah. So I will make sure I put everything there.
Yeah, get it right, girl.
We will. Yeah. So hopefully next week we'll have a great show. I hope there's not a lot of hot topics in the news next week, because I swear, most of the time when I go into some of the newspapers, listening to some of the shows, I'm like, golly.
Honestly, I wish that we could find some really positive things to speak about next week.
Really,
because it's always so depressing and always so negative when we're talking about things that has happened during the week. So if we can find some really good and exciting, even if it's about a little child that won a spelling bee or something, but there has to be something positive, or some many things positive that we can speak of that are happening in Liberia.
And if you're on here, and somebody and something's happening, please inbox us. And we'll be more than happy. If we got to bring you on to explain what it is, that's fine. We want to hear good stories.
Because it's very
be downers.
Gotta give a shout out to Fred Cully. I reading the comments here.
Downtown.
Downtown. She on One National, and I used to selling everything in Liberia. We have Jenna. Hi, Jenna. We miss you too. And I know the chief of staff was on earlier. Our feminist in
Prince.
We should bring Jenna on.
Yeah, he got to come on one day.
Jenna.
Love and
Jenna. Matu.
Yes, Jenna is another.
Jenny is Jenna.
Y'all are Jenna.
Your problem is y'all let her put a muff.
Her name is Jenna.
They let her put a muff in other people.
Jenna, why you need Jenna?
Jenna. Now I'm confused.
Jenna,
I'm
you
like,
pick up
not
the
again.
as your dear. Because we don't forget.
Oh God. But yes, and of course, Charlene, I see you on here. We're gonna be calling you soon. You know me and my women participation business. It's gonna happen. And thank you so much, William. Here, he said we're tired listening to the men complain we need solutions. I'm telling you, it will be really, really nice to set up a roundtable. That's coming up in Liberia, a roundtable discussion with solutions from the private sector. But I will tell you more about it, as the time gets closer. So once again, ladies, thank you for joining, everybody. And we will see you next Sunday at 9 p.m. Liberian time, 5 p.m. Washington, D.C. East Coast time, and 4 p.m. Minnesota. That's
But you
Central,
forgot
right?
California?
And that's Central. Man, no.
Yes.
Let people put their time. Yeah, man.
It'll be all right.
Yeah, let them in California. Until we see one of them on here that said they're from California, we're not for this.
Yeah, they're on here.
Who's
What
that?
are you talking about? My cousin.
They're on here.
My
Okay.
cousin wasn't.
All right, guys. So,
all right, ladies.
once
Good night. Good show again.
Mm.
Good. Once you take a taste, you can't leave the place. Once you drink that pepper soup, you can't get away.
Yes.
They're still taping that.